As an organization that has dedicated the past 2 decades to protecting children from harmful chemicals, we hope you'll find today's information valuable. Before we jump in, I want to share a few key announcements and best practices in case you're new to our webinars. After our 3 guest speakers have presented, we're going to host a Q&A portion. If you have questions for one of our presenters, please write your message in the chat box on the lower left-hand corner of the screen and include which speaker you're addressing your question to. To ensure that everything runs smoothly, the cutoff period to ask questions is going to be 11:35 a.m. Because we are only going to have 15 to 20 minutes for the Q&A period, we unfortunately won't be able to answer all of your questions, but we'll do our best to get through as many as possible. Today's presentation is part of our new Healthy Schools and Daycares Toolkit and Resource Center, which is brought to you in part by Bona Hardwood Floor Cleaner and 7th Generation. This presentation is being recorded and will be available by Monday in our Resource Center, along with our free interactive ebook, downloadable brochure, and an infographic. You can access this Resource Center at healthychild.org/resource center. Okay, let's get started. Choosing a daycare center or navigating your school options, public and private, nursery and elementary, can be overwhelming, to say the least. Up until this moment, your main parenting concerns have primarily been things you have control over, but suddenly you're tossed into this world where the decisions about snacks, construction materials, and cleaning products, to say nothing about curriculum, aren't yours alone. Try as you may, you might not be able to influence these choices. But our children are in these new-to-you spaces day in and day out. In general, schools should be and are about ABCs and beyond, not lead paint or pesticides or unhealthy art supplies. But the EPA estimates that half of America's 115,000 schools have poor indoor air quality. From construction materials to nap mats, toxic substances are prevalent, potentially harming children at critical moments of development. It can be really confusing for parents to understand these issues and to understand what they have control over and what, if any, federal or state legislation protects their kids at school. Whether you're a parent, a daycare provider, a teacher, a faculty member, we have a wonderful lineup of experts and speakers today that are working hard to expand awareness and provide simple solutions. So we're going to start with our first speaker. Our first speaker this afternoon is Suzanne Kretschmer, who's the co-founder of and director of operations at Grades of Green, which is a nonprofit that aims to inspire and empower kids and the broader school community to care for the environment. Dedicated to reducing waste and protecting public health, Suzanne was a recipient of the California State PTA Honorary Service Award and the EPA Environmental Award. She was instrumental in organizing students to ask the city of Manhattan Beach to ban plastic bags. Very cool, a ban that was upheld in July of 2011 by the Supreme Court. Suzanne has also received a certificate of congressional commendation from the U.S. Congress for her exceptional efforts to promote environmental conservation. Today, Suzanne is going to address some of the major issues lurking in the school environment and actions parents can take to create a better, safer place for our kids. Suzanne, thanks so much for joining us. I'll let you take the floor.
Great, thanks so much for having me. So today I'm going to talk to you about how Grades of Green inspires parents and teachers and administrators to work with the districts to get toxins out of schools. Clearly, chemicals and kids don't mix. We all know why. Kids spend a huge amount of time at school. Preschool kids start from 1 to 2 hours a day, up to college kids who are there sometimes 24 hours a day when they're living on campus. So how can we as parents ensure that our kids are not being exposed to these dangerous chemicals? Well, there actually is quite a bit you can do, and I'm going to walk you through that today. So obviously, many cleaners contain harmful chemicals. Here's an example of Windex, a very commonly used household cleaner, and Comet. There's 7 carcinogens detected in Comet, and the misperception is that when you use Comet, it smells good, your house is clean, you feel like you're doing your kids a favor, but the reality is as we all know, that we're actually poisoning our kids when we use products like this. But there is something you can do about that. And the way that Grades of Green approaches the problem is number one, we approach the district and work with them to make the switch to Green Seal certified products. Then we push out the education to the teachers to ensure that the teachers are not then bringing in harmful cleaning supplies to undermine the efforts that we've made with the district. Most of you who are parents and teachers know the teachers love these Clorox wipes, but they contain, harmful chemicals. So we want to work to educate the teachers so they don't undermine our efforts. We also want to educate the parents because we don't want our kids going into a classroom having great, clean, fresh air, and then going home into a home full of toxins. So we want to encourage the parents as well to make the switch. And then lastly, educate the students. We're trying to inspire and empower kids to care for the environment. So the first step in doing that is to educate them. So the first step that you need to take when you're trying to get your school or your district to switch is to work with the district. So here's a breakdown of that. So number one, you want to educate yourself. And the Grades of Green website is a great place to do that. Under our initiatives, we have a category called R3 Project, and there's an activity specifically called Green Cleaning Supplies. So I would recommend that you go there, and it's got a huge amount of resources, including a flyer called The Effects of Toxins on Our Kids, and that will educate you to give you a lot of information on why all these toxins are bad, and it's a great tool to bring with you to the district or forward to your district administrators so they understand the problem. And then the second thing you want to do with regards to educating yourself is find out what's actually happening at the school. Is the district the one making the decision? Are the individual schools making the decisions? Kind of get your arms around what your task is. And then the second thing you want to do, which in my opinion is your most powerful tool, is enlist kids in this project. So if you have kids involved, you're going to have a much higher success rate than if it's just parents. We have found, Grades of Green have found that kids are really powerful, and if the kids make the ask, the district or the school will listen. And if you're having trouble finding, like, how do I find kids to get involved, find out if the school has an Earth Club and approach those kids. Ask a science teacher, are there any kids at the school who are really environmentally minded? Ask your kids' friends. Or look around, at adults who are driving Priuses or seem, they compost, or, and approach those parents and say, do you want to help me with this project, and would your child like to help me? And by enlisting kids, not only do you have a group of kids, but then usually their parents come on board and say, well, how can I help? So you go from one advocate to, if you have 5 kids and 5 parents, now all of a sudden there's 11 of you, and there's just power in numbers. And then you want to make your plan. You want to figure out what you're going to do when you approach the district, when you have this meeting. And I would recommend that you definitely get the kids involved. Give each kid a speaking point. If you have high school kids that are making the switch, have them run the meeting. So make your plan. Figure out exactly how you're going to run this meeting. And then ideally, what you want to present when you're in this meeting with the district is that you're going to get the district to make the switch. Then you, as your green team, per se, the kids and the adults, will push this education out to the teachers, to the parents, and to the kids. And then you, of course, want to set up your meeting. And you want to have the kids make the ask there if you can, because the chances of success getting a meeting with the district when it comes from a parent are decreased. But when it comes from kids, it's very, very likely the district will move forward with the meeting. And then you want to go ahead and move forward with the meeting. And here is the next slide that talks about that. So when you're in this meeting, and that you've come in and you've made the ask and you say, hey, we really are worried about our kids being exposed to these harmful toxins. We'd love the district to switch to Green Seal certified products, and this is why. And then you have your kids read a fact from our Effects of Toxins on on children. For example, you could have a kid saying, over 10 million school days are missed each year by school children experiencing asthma-related problems, right? Well, that equates to if a kid misses school, the school doesn't get paid by the state, and the school is going to lose money. The kids aren't going to have as high test scores because they're missing class, and so on and so forth. So you're laying out these facts for the district why it's important to make this switch. Not only is it going to help the health of our kids, it will help the bottom line at the school. So you have your kids do your little presentation, and then you listen. Listen to what the administrators say, because they may have already taken this into consideration. And we had one district that we went in, we made our presentation, and the principal was great. He said, you know, we've been thinking about doing this, and I brought Mary, she's in charge, and Mary, go ahead and make the switch. And that was all it took. So stop and just listen to what they have to say. And there's chances that the district's going to have some objections. Or, you know, I've heard these green cleaning supplies don't work as well. Well, arm yourself. Come with references from other schools that have made the switch. You know, you'll get my email at the end of this webinar. So feel free to email me. I can get you references. They may ask, you know, they might say, oh, you know, our custodians don't want to do it. And you say, well, you know, we've got a green team here. We're willing to help. Take some of the workload off them. So just be ready to listen to their objections and work on overcoming those objections. And then once you've had your talk, usually the next steps really lay themselves out for you. The district will say, well, we need to look into this, or can you help us look into this, or whatnot. So once you have your next steps laid out, then you have a plan. And but you as a parent or as an administrator or teacher, you can definitely add to that plan by saying, once the district makes the switch, we will help you educate the parents and the teachers and the kids. So in order to push it out to the teachers, this green cleaning supply lesson has some great tools for that as well. There's a flyer in there called Non-Toxic Classroom Supplies. So we encourage you to just send one email to the district and ask them to push it out to all the teachers. And in that email, you want to educate the teachers what kind of non-toxic classroom supplies they can use, and that's right there in the flyer. You want to encourage the teachers to open their doors and their windows while teaching. Let some of the fresh air in. Encourage them to go sit outside, have a lesson outside on the lawn if you want. You want to talk to the teachers about the dangers of the triclosan, which is found in hand sanitizers, and I'll get to a slide on that. And you also want to point out the dangers of the bleach and wipes, because those are biggies for the teachers. And then lastly, if you're in an elementary school or a middle school and you're like, yeah, the teachers just aren't board, we can't get them engaged, Grades of Green has this great program called the Green King and Queen Challenge, and it's on our website as well, and it's where you encourage the teachers to have a contest to see who can have the greenest classroom. And part of the criteria is for the teachers to be using green cleaning supplies, and it's really fun, and everybody loves a contest, and you can have a little prize, like we gave away an environmentally friendly manicure and pedicure to the winning teacher. So here's the non-toxic classroom cleaning supplies, and here is an earth tip called Beware of the Hand Sanitizer, and you can attach that to the email out to the teachers, and it just basically talks about the problems with this chemical triclosan that you find in hand sanitizers. And lastly, here's some problems with Clorox wipes. So it's all here at your fingertips. And then you want to push it out to the parents, and you can easily do this through the school's newsletter. So I would recommend putting an announcement in the school newsletter saying, hey, this school made this switch to green cleaning supplies. This is great. We're really excited, and congratulations to the school. It makes your kids healthier. And by the way, we recommend that you make the switch at home, and you lay it out. So Grades of Green has this trash talk announcement. I'll go to the next thing right here, with some fun did you knows. Did you know that taking off your shoes at the door can reduce 85 pollutants such as lead and fertilizers from entering your home? These are great little tidbits that that parents like to see. So you can use the trash talk announcement, and we also have this great earth tip. Right here, let the clean begin, and it tells the parents why they should switch to green cleaning supplies in their home. And lastly, you can always just put a banner up at the school. This school uses Green Seal certified cleaning products to keep your kids healthy. It's just raising awareness, getting it in front of the parents. And then lastly, you want to educate the kids. So Grades of Green under our 3R curriculum has a great lesson plan that the teachers can teach, or better yet, you can use your little green team of kids that have helped you get the district to make the switch to do a walking assembly. So these kids can go from classroom to classroom and they can educate the kids on the importance of using green cleaning supplies. And we always find, if you can inspire the kids, that's the best way to go. So you have these kids do it, or you just pass it out to the teachers and the teachers can teach this lesson. You can also reach out to your community. Reach out to the Girl Scout leaders, for example, who are always looking for projects, and say, hey, here's a great lesson plan on why green cleaning supplies are important. And there's even fun ways and fun green cleaning supplies that the kids can make themselves. And after school programs, the kids that stay at school and do their homework clubs or whatever, they're looking for curriculum as well. So point them to our website, and here's a way. All of a sudden, you start with a school, and the next thing you know, you're inspiring Girl Scout troops, and you're inspiring after-school clubs, and the next thing you know, you've created this big movement. And then the last thing that Grades of Green always recommends when you make a really exciting change like this at a school is to publicize your success. So we recommend talk to your local newspaper and say, hey, our district just made the switch, this is why, and of course get the kids to make some quotes and have them run an article. And then of course, announce the switch in your school newsletter and put up the banner. And voila, you have just made the switch. You're making your kids healthier, happier, and more successful, and you can be really proud of yourself, and you're starting a movement. So there you have it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. That was both inspiring and insightful, and you completely called me out. If somebody wanted to find me to have safety numbers, they could look for my Prius, which I'm definitely driving. So our next speaker is Bettina Elliott F. Siegel, and she's a former lawyer and a writer who blogs regularly at The Lunch Tray, which is a nationally recognized blog on children and food with an emphasis on food policy and school food reform. She's a parent of 2 children in public schools, and she's actively involved in school food reform in Houston. And she serves as a chairperson of the Food Nutrition Subcommittee of the district's School Healthy Advisory Council and on its Food Services Parents Advisory Committee. In 2012, Bettina launched an online petition, which you may have heard of. It garnered more than 250,000 signatures and led the USDA to change its policy with respect to the use of pink slime in school food ground beef. Thank you for that, Bettina. And it's a pleasure to have you with us today. We're avid supporters of your efforts, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on how to improve school food standards. I'll let you begin.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. What I'd like to do in the time that I have with you is share 5 rules that I've come up with that I hope will be helpful in teaching parents how to become more effective advocates in improving their school food environment. And then I want to end by sharing some resources that I personally have found very helpful, and I want to pass those on to you. But first, I thought it might be good to define what we mean by the school food environment. To my mind, that actually comprises 3 very distinct areas. First, we've got the school meal, then we have competitive food, which I'll define, and then there's food in the classroom. So starting with the school meal, here we're talking about the federally subsidized meal served for lunch, often for breakfast, and in some schools even supper. As most of you listening probably know, this year was the first year we saw the implementation of new and greatly improved nutritional standards. So I won't go into those in detail, but you certainly should be seeing more fruits and vegetables, more whole grains, low-fat dairy. So there's a lot of good news in the area of the school meal. There are, however, continuing concerns that many parents have. Just based on my own observation here in Houston and talking to parents on my blog, The Lunch Tray, common concerns are the menu choices, too much pizza and hamburgers every week, the use of highly processed foods that contain questionable ingredients. Some parents are particularly concerned about the sugar content in flavored milk. You may be happy with the meals as menued, but they're not showing up in a very appetizing way. And some parents are frustrated because they can't get transparency from their district. They'd like to know more about what their kids are eating. Turning to competitive food, this is food that is sold to children during the school day in competition with the federal school meal. Here's a kind of partial list of the main areas in which competitive food is offered to children during the day: a la carte snack lines, fundraisers, and school stores, that sort of thing. Again, there's some good news to report. USDA is currently in the process of finalizing some really landmark competitive food rules, and there's a little infographic. I don't know how well you can see, but just to give you a snapshot idea of what we expect to see at the end of the process. And those are going to go into effect next year. And then, but despite this, really great development, there are still some concerns about competitive food. First of all, as I said, the new rules are not in effect this year, so you may be having problems this year that are not addressed. And then even when the rules do go into effect, we don't yet know how vigorously they're going to be enforced in all areas. There's also a loophole that allows states to carve out a certain number of exempt fundraisers every year that don't have to comply with the nutritional requirements. And I think it remains to be seen whether that loophole is going to be problematic in some areas. And then finally, there's food in the classroom. This is the food brought in for birthday celebrations, holiday parties, teachers handing out typically candy but other junk food as a reward for good behavior or academic performance. The practice of giving kids candy or peppermints, juice to keep them alert on testing days, that's something that I experienced in my own kids' elementary school, to my dismay. And then some schools actually have a system where parents are supplying snack on a regular basis for the whole classroom. There are really many concerns surrounding food in the classroom. Probably first and foremost, there are allergy concerns for kids affected by food allergies. Obviously, obesity is an issue, poor nutrition. There's the question of whether we should be using food as a reward. There's loss of instructional time when food is brought into the classroom. And I should note here that since this food is offered to children, it's not sold to them. This is not going to be covered by the new competitive food rules that we just discussed. So, okay, that's the snapshot look at the school food environment. So what are some tools for effective advocacy? Oops, we're missing a slide. I guess we're missing a slide. Okay, so my first rule, which doesn't appear, is don't be a fruitcake. And where I got rule number 1, don't be a fruitcake, is from this card that was handed to me. This is from a group here in Houston that is involved in education reform. And I think they actually borrowed this from somebody else. But I really love this. And basically, you can read it while I'm talking. But what they're saying is, if you're a parent trying to effectuate any change in your school, whether it's what Suzanne just talked about or school food, if you're one parent, it's very easy for a decision maker to blow you off and label you a fruitcake. And even if you have a friend with you, you might be perceived as a fruitcake and a friend. But as you can see from the chart, if you have 50 people standing behind you, then you're quite a powerful organization. So rule number 1 is don't be a fruitcake. And in looking for potential allies for your cause, obviously it will be natural for parents to seek out other parents who are like-minded on the issue. But I would also encourage you to think a little outside the box. Sometimes there are community groups or business leaders, certainly health professionals in your area, who might very well support whatever it is you're trying to do. Similarly, your school board members may be very sympathetic. It depends. I've encountered school board members who don't care much about nutrition, and I've encountered school board members who are very attuned to those issues. Your district has a SHAC, that's a School Health Advisory Council or Student Health Advisory Council or Committee. This is the advisory board that is set up to advise your school board on issues related to student health. That's obviously a really powerful source of potential allies and resources. And then finally, it seems to be a growing practice that PTAs and PTOs set up wellness committees, which are sort of like little shacks within the school. If your school has one of those, obviously that's a great place to start in terms of finding like-minded parents and support. Rule number 2 is to focus your efforts. Sometimes you are in a school where it seems like there are many, many areas that need improvement, and it can feel overwhelming. And I would encourage you to really prioritize your concerns and start off with a goal that's something easily defined, easily manageable, and something you think you could actually achieve. And start with that goal, and with the group that you formed under rule number 1, make sure that your group is on the same page and you all know what the agreed upon cause is and exactly what it is that you're seeking to achieve. Sometimes I think people feel a little frustrated. They would rather achieve a sweeping overhaul. We'd all like to see that. But incremental small changes tend to be the way school food reform happens, at least in my observation. And you can really use the momentum you achieve from one victory to go on to tackle the next. Rule number 3 is to get the lay of the land. And what I mean here is, first of all, you're going to have to figure out who the decision maker is who you need to approach, and that can really vary quite a bit. if the issue is food in the classroom, obviously a teacher is probably the decision maker, maybe the principal. When it comes to the school meal, however, I think a lot of parents are surprised that their school typically has no input whatsoever in the food that shows up in the cafeteria. That's very often a district level decision. So in that case, you're really going to be seeking out the head of your food services department most likely. Another tip that I've learned, and I think this may be common sense for some people, but it wasn't necessarily for me, is to move from the bottom up on the organizational chart. So if your issue is with a practice carried out by a teacher, start with the teacher and don't jump over his or her head to the principal. That's just a way to prevent ill will, and you're much more likely to find an ally in the decision maker if you don't jump over their head and go to their boss. And another tip that I'd like to share that I've certainly learned is you're probably better off if you at first at least assume the best of the person that you're dealing with over whatever issue, even if it's very contentious. In my experience, people do not go into teaching or into child nutrition unless they actually care about kids. So even if you and this person disagree about a particular issue, at least you have that common ground. You share this concern about child welfare. And I think negotiations and discussions always go more smoothly if you can start off with that common ground. Another good thing to do is to try to figure out before you do anything else, how did we get here? How did the status quo come about? So for example, if your particular concern is a vending machine selling junk food in your child's middle school, before you march into the principal's office and start railing about it, it would be good to find out, when did this thing get installed? Who is benefiting from it? How much money are we making from it? Where is that money going? And the more information you have, the more likely you are to be able to be actually a partner as opposed to an adversary. You can come in with suggestions right off the bat on how you could accomplish the same goals in a helpful way. My next rule is to investigate the legal landscape, and I put legal in quotes because I'm not strictly speaking about laws here, although laws can be at issue. But what I'm suggesting is take some time to look around to see if there's any sort of outside external authority that you can point to that supports whatever it is you're trying to do. Here in Texas, where I am, that we actually have state regulations relating to competitive food. So that's obviously something very important to know if your concern is related to competitive food. Similarly, every state has a state agency that's been appointed by the USDA to administer the school meal program. This is called a school food authority. Typically, it's your Department of Education. Here in Texas, it's actually our Department of Agriculture. And often the SFA will have issued guidance documents or standards for all kinds of health-related issues, connected with nutrition, even things like food in the classroom and rewards sometimes. So you may want to look around and see if you can find any of those documents. Similarly, your SHAC should have a wellness policy in place. Typically, you can find that on your district's website. If you can't, you might have to call and dig around a bit. Some wellness policies are very loose and vague and not particularly helpful. Some wellness policies are very stringent and powerful. Now, these documents don't actually have the force of law. You can't, no one's going to be punished, I think, if they violate it. But it's something that is very useful to be able to have in your back pocket. If you go to a principal and point out to the principal that they're actually in violation of district policy, that can be quite persuasive. And then finally, sometimes schools actually have policies that have kind of been pushed to the side or been forgotten or not well communicated to teachers or to fellow parents. And sometimes you just have to go back and look, and then you can come to the principal or the teacher and remind them that the school has already set a policy about some of these issues. Rule number 5 is the last rule, but I would say that this is really the most important one, and this is to educate yourself. It takes time sometimes to really understand the issue that you're grappling with, but I can promise you, based on personal experience, that the time you take will always pay off. I think we all understand that an emotional rant is less effective than a calm presentation of facts and figures, and sometimes it takes time to go gather that information, but I encourage you to do so. Even something as simple as handing out junk food rewards in the classroom, you could come in and just be angry and railing about junk food. But how much better would it be if you could come in and have a list of the leading medical organizations and their statements coming out against the use of food as a reward, if you had information about how much sugar children should be eating in the course of a day, and if you could point out how this regular provision of treats is actually creating a problem. The more facts you have at your fingertips, the more effective you're going to be as an advocate. If your particular area of concern is the school meal, then truly I can't encourage you enough to take this advice to heart. I think almost every food service director would tell you that they, on a regular basis, have parents marching into their office, telling them how to do their job, often in quite an emotional and confrontational way. And that's, that's part of their job to deal with that. But if you can walk in and demonstrate that you've done a little homework, that you know the budgetary constraints that they're under, or that you're willing to learn, that you understand a little bit, to some degree, the regulatory constraints that they're under. If you can show that you've done your homework, I promise you that you will leap ahead in their minds as someone that they will be listening to and treating as a partner as opposed to either a dilettante or just an angry adversary. So now I'd like to share with you some resources that I have found very helpful. Turning specifically to the school meal, if that is your area of interest or concern, if you have the time, I highly recommend reading this book, which is called Free for All by Janet Poppendieck. This came out in 2010, so it's a little bit out of date. It doesn't reflect the new school meal standards, but it's an excellent primer on the National School Lunch Program, from its inception in the 40s all the way to today. And if you take the time to read this, you will be incredibly well educated about the challenges that your district is facing. If I can't sell you on reading an entire book, and I know many people don't have the time, these are two websites that I really like just to help parents get their feet wet understanding the school meal program and how it works. The first website is actually the Food and Nutrition Services website. This is the branch of USDA that runs the school meal programs. And the second is actually an anti-hunger website, but I think they just do a terrific job of breaking this information down in a very digestible way. And I often turn to FRAC to get my own facts straight, so I think that's a great resource. In terms of websites that are specifically geared toward parent advocates, there are many sources out there. These are by far my three favorites. The first is PeachSF, Parents, Educators, and Advocates Connection for Healthy School Food. This was created by Dana Waldow, who is a school food reformer in San Francisco, and it really represents the product of her decade-long experience on the ground involved in school food reform. It's very useful. Similarly, Rudd Roots Parents, which is an offshoot of the Yale Rudd Center of Food Policy and Obesity. Again, they are specifically targeting this website toward parent advocates, and it is just unbelievably well stocked with resources. I can't recommend it highly enough. And then the Center for Science and the Public Interest, also an excellent resource. It's not so much geared toward parents per se, although there are many fact sheets and other materials useful to parents. Specifically with respect to food in the classroom, I'll give a little plug to my own Food in the Classroom Manifesto, which is actually a document I just kind of pounded out one day when I was very angry about the amount of junk food my kids were getting routinely in their classroom, including, full-size cans of Coke and big bags of candy. It's basically just a list of 10 reasons why I think food really doesn't belong in the classroom, and many parents have told me it's been a very useful starting point for discussions at their school. And I'd again recommend Rudd Roots and CSPI, but specifically you'll see I've noted that Rudd Roots has this great added sugars fact sheet, which is a very useful document when your issue is food in the classroom. And CSPI has a very nice list of classroom rewards that don't involve food, so that's good. And then there are two other resources I'd like to point you to on food in the classroom. Casey Hines is a food activist in Kentucky, and she created a food as reward infographic. And what she did is she took the time to go to every leading medical association that has commented on the use of food as a reward and put the one or two sentences that they have to say about it. And so that's a really great and persuasive document to show a teacher or a principal. And then finally, Spoonfed, the blogger there has created a kind of collection of documents under the heading Why School and Junk Food Don't Mix, and that's also a useful resource for parents. So I realize that the title of this webinar is Easy Steps to Healthier Schools. I have to be honest with you, sometimes school food reform can be easy, sometimes it can be a slow and frustrating process, but I encourage you to not give up, to be patient. Real change is possible, and of course the health of our children makes it well worth your time and effort. So if you have any questions or if you need any more resources from me, please feel free to contact me. Here's all my information, and I'll send it back to you, Lexi. Thank you.
Thanks, Bettina. I'm sort of on this end of speechless. I agree that sometimes it's just hard, and we do mention that in our ebook that school food can be a little difficult, but ridiculously worth it. So thank you for everything you had to share. Our final speaker of the day is Mike Shave. He's the Markets Campaign Coordinator for the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice. Mike has over a decade of experience working on environmental health and justice issues. For 4 years, he was the Western New York Director of Citizens Environment Coalition, where he coordinated community, marketplace, and policy campaigns, including the Toxic Free Legacy Bucket Brigade and Kodak Corporate Accountability campaigns, resulting in substantial victories for environmental and public health. At CHEJ, Mike has coordinated the successful national PVC and BPA marketplace transformation campaigns, which have convinced some of the world's biggest companies to phase out PVC, phthalates, and BPA. Ethisphere magazine listed Mike as one of the 100 most influential people in business ethics for 2007, and the PVC campaign received the Path to Victory Business Ethics Award. He is the author or co-author of numerous reports, including Volatile Vinyl, The New Shower Curtains Chemical Smell, and Toxics Toys R Us. He has a BS in Environmental Studies from the State University of New York at Buffalo. Mike, always a pleasure. You're such an active force in creating awareness around environmental health issues, and we look forward to hearing how we can reduce exposure to phthalates in building materials and products.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks to Healthy Child, Healthy World for organizing today's presentation, and thanks to my two fabulous co-presenters. I learned a lot, and I'm sure many of you did as well, and really excited to continue working to promote safer and healthier school indoor environments. And I think my presentation really complements a lot of what was talked about today. We've heard a lot about green cleaning. We heard about how to promote healthier food in schools. We also learned a lot about how change is actually made in schools. How do we actually make change in our schools? And I'm glad that the other two presenters talked about that, because that is not something that I included too much of in my presentation, just given the limited amount of time. So I'm here today to talk about another important children's health issue in schools, and that's the use of toxic PVC plastic and phthalates in school building materials and products. For those of you that may not be familiar yet, PVC stands for polyvinyl chloride. It's also known as vinyl plastic. And unfortunately, according to scientific researchers as well as environmental and public health organizations, vinyl plastic is the most toxic plastic on the planet. And unfortunately, it is widespread in many different products in schools. And we're concerned about the use of vinyl in schools because from production to use to disposal, vinyl releases hazardous chemicals that are harmful to children's health that have been linked to serious chronic health problems on the rise in children and adults, from asthma, which of course is the #1 chronic childhood illness today, the #1 cause of school absenteeism, to learning developmental disabilities such as autism, to other serious chronic health problems such as cancer, reproductive health problems, etc. And vinyl is unique from some other plastics because it pollutes from production to use to disposal. So we often say that there's no safe way to make this plastic, there's no safe way to use it, and finally there's no safe way to dispose of it. As I mentioned before, vinyl is prevalent in many different products in schools. The #1 use of vinyl is in building materials, such as the white PVC pipe that you may be familiar with, that some of you may even have in your home. So the #1 use of vinyl in schools is in building materials. It's also found in flooring, roofing. If your school has carpeting, it's often found in carpeting. It's even found in playground equipment. So when schools are built, when schools are renovated, unfortunately, vinyl is commonly used in many different building materials. It's also commonly found in products that schools purchase. Office supplies purchased by schools, such as computers, laptops, office equipment, such as 3-ring binders. It's also found in many common children's back-to-school supplies that perhaps you may have bought for your children this past summer, such as backpacks and lunch boxes, paper clips, etc. And as I mentioned before, we're concerned about the use of vinyl in schools because of its entire life cycle. It pollutes. To make vinyl, some of the most hazardous chemicals on the planet are used to manufacture it, such as chlorine gas, mercury, vinyl chloride, ethylene dichloride, these are chemicals that are fundamentally hazardous. So there's really no safe way to manufacture this plastic. It requires the use of hazardous chemicals linked to cancer and other serious health problems. So for example, the main building block chemical that's used to make vinyl plastic in our schools, such as the vinyl flooring that may be in your children's classroom, is vinyl chloride, which according to the US EPA is a chemical known to cause cancer in humans. And so when this plastic is manufactured, the communities around the plants, the workers are often exposed to these fundamentally hazardous chemicals. And it's an issue of not just occupational safety and health, but it's also an issue of environmental justice and racism, because predominantly it's often low-income communities and communities of color that bear the burden of pollution from the manufacture of this plastic. And we can spend all day just talking about that alone, but just since we have a limited amount of time, we need to move on. But this is really a very important reason why we're concerned about the use of vinyl in schools. Perhaps more importantly, though, particularly for schools, is one of the things that makes vinyl unique from other plastics, from most other plastics, is that you need to add certain chemicals to either soften it or to stabilize it, to strengthen it so that it doesn't degrade. These include heavy metals like lead, cadmium, and organogens. Lead and cadmium and organogens are often added to vinyl products to strengthen it or stabilize it. And also phthalates. Phthalates are chemicals that are added to vinyl to make it soft and flexible. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard about concerns with the use of phthalates in cosmetics. Well, the #1 use of all phthalates is actually in vinyl plastic. Over 90% of all phthalates are used to soften vinyl plastic. BPA is also used sometimes as an additive in vinyl. So the concern here is that these chemicals, the phthalates, the lead, the cadmium, the organogens, these chemicals are not chemically bound to the plastic. So when we install vinyl in our schools, when we use it in the classroom, when we buy children's school supplies that contain these additives, children in turn can be exposed to these compounds. The compounds are released from the plastic. Children can breathe them in. They can get into children's bodies. When children handle vinyl plastic products, they can be exposed to these products, to these chemicals of concern, I should say, and children are being exposed to them. So phthalates, we talked a little bit about. Phthalates are getting into the bodies of children as a result. According to the federal government, over 90% of all Americans have phthalates in their bodies, and if you look at which populations have the highest levels, it's actually young children, girls in particular, ages 6 to 9, and also women of childbearing age, often moms, face some of the highest exposures to phthalates. The use of vinyl in schools contributes to indoor air quality problems, so when we install vinyl flooring in schools and classrooms and hallways, volatile organic compounds, VOCs, can off-gas from the plastic. And children and teachers and other stakeholders in schools can in turn be exposed. So to give an example, if you've ever installed a new vinyl shower curtain in your home, you've smelled that new shower curtain smell. That's actually the smell of toxic pollutants that you're breathing in, that you're being exposed to. We did a study some years ago, which you see pictured here, and we found that one new vinyl shower curtain, just one little shower curtain, can release over 100 chemicals into the air in your home. So think about just one little shower curtain. Think about all the other vinyl plastic products that may be lurking in your children's school when it's built or renovated. I mentioned phthalates before. Phthalates are one of the big reasons why we're concerned about the use of vinyl in schools. Many of you know that phthalates have been banned in toys. And while phthalates have been banned in toys by the federal government, they continue to be completely legal to be used in products in schools. We published a report last year that found that 75% of children's back-to-school supplies we tested contained high levels of phthalates, so high that the products would be banned if the products were toys, but because it's legal for companies to use phthalates in children's school supplies and vinyl products, these chemicals continue to be used, unfortunately, in school supplies. And phthalates have been linked to many serious health problems. I mentioned asthma before. Phthalates have been linked to a range of reproductive health problems, including early puberty in girls, which is a risk factor for breast cancer, decreased fertility in boys and girls, ADHD, autism, obesity, the list goes on and on and on. Unfortunately, every week, literally, new scientific research is coming out that shows that phthalates are harmful to children's health. So we're concerned about the use of vinyl in schools because children can in turn then be exposed to these phthalates. And finally, there's no safe way to dispose of vinyl when it talked about its toxic life cycle when vinyl burns in accidental building fires, when we throw it out in the trash, when it's burned in incinerators. Vinyl releases cancer-causing chemicals called dioxins, which, like phthalates, are endocrine disruptors and they're harmful at very low levels of exposure. So really, there's no safe way to make this plastic, there's no safe way to use it, and there's no safe way to dispose of it. The dioxins that I mentioned, which are released when vinyl burns, eventually are making their way into the food supply, so we in turn are all being exposed to these harmful chemicals because they tend to build up in up the food supply and in the food chain, and we in turn are all exposed. Running out of time here, but the good news is that there are plenty of safer and healthier alternatives, and in fact there's a major market movement away from the use of vinyl and phthalates in consumer products. Some of the world's biggest Fortune 500 companies have adopted policies to reduce or eliminate the use of vinyl and phthalates, including large retailers like Walmart and Target, auto manufacturers like Volkswagen, electronics firms like Apple and Dell and Samsung, even healthcare institutions. Some of the biggest healthcare institutions across the country, like Kaiser Permanente, have been working to reduce and eliminate the use of vinyl. And there are plenty of safer and healthier alternatives for schools. In the building sector, we're seeing a lot of movement in recent years to move schools towards greener and healthier buildings. Just this year, the U.S. Green Building Council has adopted new credits that provide a framework to reduce or eliminate the use of vinyl in school building materials. So if your school is undergoing renovations, or if there's a new school being built, there's an opportunity to encourage your school district to build a LEED certified building that reduces or eliminates the use of vinyl in building materials. We've talked about resources before. We have published lots and lots of resources on alternatives to vinyl for schools, which are all available for free on our website. If you go to our website, chej.org/thisvinylschool, you can actually see you can actually click through a interactive school. You see it pictured here, and you can actually click through different rooms in a school and find out what are the most common products that are made out of this harmful plastic and safer alternatives. We also recently just published a green purchasing guide, so if you wanted to encourage your school to adopt a green purchasing policy, you can use our guidebook, which is available at chej.org/greenpurchasing. That has a lot of good information, tips, and resources that you can provide to your school on how to purchase environmentally preferable products. And also as parents, you can avoid the purchase of toxic vinyl and phthalates in school supplies. Every year we publish our annual Back to School Guide to PVC-free school supplies, and that's also available as well on our website at chej.org/backtoschool2013. Oftentimes we're asked, are the alternatives cost competitive? And the answer is yes. And in fact, in some cases, schools can actually save money by specifying safer alternatives. So one example we often talk about is flooring. Vinyl is very prevalent in flooring in schools. One of the alternatives that's available is not only safer and healthier for children, which is linoleum, but it is also way more cheaper than vinyl. Especially if you cost it out over time. So while linoleum is a little bit more expensive to install up front, it's actually much cheaper even after a year. So after 1 year, a 10,000 square foot school can save approximately $16,000. After 5 years, a school would save roughly $80,000. And after 10 years, a school would save nearly $160,000. And that's because the cleaning products that are typically used in vinyl are not only hazardous, but also quite expensive. So, what can you do as a parent or teacher? And this is really similar to a lot of what was discussed before. You can encourage your school to adopt a green purchasing policy. To purchase greener, more environmentally preferable products that don't contain these harmful chemicals and plastics. If your school is undergoing any renovations, or if a new school is being built, you can encourage your school to be built with PVC-free building materials. And as a consumer, as a parent, if you're going shopping for back-to-school supplies, you can look for PVC-free school supplies to purchase for your family. We have a lot of great resources on our website, which again is chj.org, fact sheets. There's a really terrific film that you can get on Netflix called Blue Vinyl that you can utilize to raise awareness among other parents and teachers. It's a really great documentary, and you can get that through Netflix. And again, yeah, we have lots of information and resources on our website, which you see listed here that you can utilize to encourage your school to go green and create healthier indoor environments by eliminating the use of these harmful chemicals and materials. So I'll leave it at that and look forward to some of the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So that is all for today's presentations, and we're going to move on to the Q&A. I've learned that an hour is not enough to talk about this really important topics. So we're going to unfortunately have a pretty short Q&A, but we've been monitoring the questions coming in over the past 30 minutes, and we've gotten a handful for today's presenters. The first question is going to go out to Suzanne at Grades of Green. So Suzanne, where can we get industrial size and economically priced green products? I've had these meetings. It's the price tag of these things that really don't factor in to the implementation.
Right. So on the non-toxic classroom cleaning supply handout that's on our website, we list 3 certification companies. So Design for the Environment, Eco Logo, and Green Seal Certified. And we also have their websites on there. All 3 of those allow you to search for industrial size products. And what we have found in terms of price is that, 5 years ago the price differential was quite high, but every year it gets closer and closer and closer. And so if you've checked prices before, I would encourage you to check them again because you might find that they are the same. And at our pilot school, the cost ended up actually being cheaper because we were able to streamline the process. A lot of product was being wasted before. So just make sure that you really do your research and consider all the factors before just saying they're more expensive. And another biggie to consider is the absenteeism. There are so many statistics out there that show that children who are subjected to poor air quality miss more days of school and therefore don't get the same funding. The schools won't get the funding. So that would be my advice. Check out those 3 Green Seal certified websites to look for the products, and then when it comes to price, it's not always just the cost of the product to factor in.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, the next question is for Bettina. Bettina, my son's 7th birthday is in a few weeks. Happy birthday. Any ideas other than food treats for him to bring to class for celebrating his day?
One of the neat things about writing the lunch tray is people often share with me their success stories in terms of kind of getting around the need to bring food in for the birthday. I mean, with my own kid, I found that these like little trinket kind of things can be just as welcome as food. I think what it comes down to is kids just want to mark their birthday in some special way. They don't necessarily care so much about the exact way in which it's done. When my daughter was, I think, 10, she brought in a T-shirt and everybody signed it, and that was a kick for everybody. There are all kinds of things that we don't think about typically. If you go to the lunch tray and if you search birthday treat dilemma, you'll find a list of something like 60 non-food suggestions from my readers that I found to be really useful. So hopefully that will help you too.
I think that's going to help me for suggesting that. So Mike, the next question is for you. As a green architect and mommy, how do we educate school districts to not specify the cheapest flooring, like VCT with phthalates? I try to educate my clients, but it usually comes down to cost, and they use that as an excuse. Cost again.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that is pretty much aligned with what I was talking about before. One of the things we found with vinyl flooring is that while it's a little bit more expensive up front, it's a little bit cheaper up front. It is significantly more expensive over the life cycle of the flooring. One of the things that makes vinyl flooring problematic is not just because of the VOCs and the phthalates that can off-gas, but because typically very toxic cleaning products are used to strip it, to wax it, to maintain it, which are not only hazardous for children and for janitorial staff, but are also quite expensive. And so we encourage architects and designers to really try to make the life cycle cost argument to school districts. Forbo, who is a manufacturer of linoleum flooring, they actually have a calculator that you can use. So if you're a parent or architect and you want to find out, okay, how much does vinyl cost compared to the safer flooring material, linoleum, which is a bio-based material, you can actually go to the website, you can plug in the amount of square feet that the school is going to use, and you can actually see that within less than a year, a school would recoup its costs and begin saving money. So as I mentioned before, a 10,000 square foot school would save $16,000. So that's really significant, not to mention the environmental and public health benefits associated with using linoleum over vinyl. So I think really kind of pointing to the cost savings that the school would realize in less than a year is huge. And we've seen that to be very successful in schools and hospitals all across the country.
Thank you so much, Mike. Really appreciate your feedback to that question. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. This concludes our presentation and the Q&A, given we are running a little bit over time. So to reiterate, this recorded presentation will be available online by Monday by visiting our online Easy Steps Resource Center at www.healthychild.org/resource-center. A huge special thank you to all of our speakers today, Suzanne, Bettina, and Mike. You can actually find their contact information on this slide, including website, Facebook page, and Twitter handle. Also, we would like to thank our sponsors of the Healthy Schools and Daycares Resource Center, Bona Hardwood Floor Cleaner and 7th Generation. To learn more, you can visit bona.com or 7thgeneration.com. For more information on how to protect children from harmful chemicals, please visit healthychild.org. Otherwise, we hope you'll join us for our next webinar in 2014 on a healthy pregnancy. Enjoy the rest of your week.